David Pawson schreibt in seinem Buch Wiedergeburt: Was Gott betrifft, ist die Vergangenheit vergeben und vergessen, nämlich dann, wenn wir Buße getan haben. Gottes Gnade hat schon viele dazu gebracht, ihre Schulden zurückzuzahlen, ihre Ehe in Ordnung zu bringen und sogar Verbrechen zu bekennen, für die sie nie bestraft worden waren. Wir haben bei Buße eigentlich immer vor Augen die Schuld, die wir getan haben. Und eine Sache vergessen wir dabei oft. Und das steht, da werden wir gewarnt in Matthäus 24, 25, in 4 Geschichten, nämlich, dass Menschen nicht bereit waren. Und es waren Gläubige. Sie waren nicht bereit. Viele Gläubige sagen, Gott ist gnädig, auch wenn ich nicht vorbereitet bin. Sie waren nicht fertig, weil sie bestimmte Dinge nicht getan haben. Sie waren nicht schlimme Menschen. Es ging nicht um Sünde. Es geht darum, etwas nicht getan zu haben. Und ihnen wird nicht vergeben und sie bekommen auch keine zweite Chance. Und es sind alles Gläubige. Sie glaubten, dass es irgendwann reicht, ernst zu machen mit dem Glauben, mit der Nachfolge, mit der Heiligung, mit der Absonderung und so weiter. Aber Matthäus 24 und 25 ist da wirklich eine Warnung und ich lasse es jetzt nochmal von David Pawson erklären.
The whole point of these 4 stories is that some were not ready. And the shock that I got when I asked in what sense were they not ready was this. They were not ready because they had not done certain things. They weren't criminals. They weren't full of vice. There wasn't a murderer, an adulterer among them. In fact, none of them is accused of a single vice or a single crime or a single sin. They are only accused of having not done something. Now that is a shock. Again, in every Church of England in Basingstoke this morning, people will recite the General Confession. And in the General Confession they will say, we have left undone the things we ought to have done. Do you know that a man can go to hell not because of what he's done or anything he's done, but because of what he didn't do? And therefore the common defense against accusation is, well, I've never done anybody any harm. That is not an adequate defense plea. Because God says, but you never did anybody any good either. Not doing any harm is not adequate. I gave you life. I gave you talents. I gave you opportunities. And you did nothing with them. Now that's the shock of these 4 stories. Remember, he's speaking to disciples again. And he's saying, you are in danger of doing nothing. In fact, to get to hell, that's all you need to do. Nothing. That's the teaching of Jesus. All you need to do. Nothing. In the first case, a man had been left to give food to the other servants, and he hadn't given it. In the second case, they were supposed to have enough oil to light the wedding, and they hadn't got it. In the third case, the man with 1 talent had failed to improve it. He hadn't spent it on himself. He hadn't gone out and stolen his master's money and indulged himself. He just hadn't done anything with it. And in the 4th case, the people said, but you never visited me, you never clothed me, you never gave me a drink. And you know, they gave the whole game away when they said, oh Lord, if we'd realized it was you. What social snobbery lies in that implication, doesn't it? In other words, we thought it was just some unimportant person. If we'd known it was you, if we'd known it was important, we'd have done it. You see, that's awful, isn't it? The sins of neglect, what are called the sins of omission, are what Jesus is talking about here. Not the bad things we've done, but the good things we haven't done. Now that's a serious word. 1982 will not be judged by the wrong things we didn't do, but by the right, or the wrong things we did do, but by the right things we didn't do. And 1983 will be judged the same as to whether we're ready. And the 6th and last thing that there is in these 4 stories is this. The unready are punished. They are not forgiven, not one of them. They are not given a second chance, not one of them. And the simple fact is that when the Lord comes back again, chances are over. The door is shut. And there is no appeal. The decision is final. You know, I find that I'm getting less and less able to enter into Christmas. I'm afraid I refused twice to preach over Christmas, once at North Church and once at Sherborne. But I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Because if I had done, I'd have preached on the second coming of the Lord. That's what people need to hear. And it's a wise church that has put Advent just before Christmas, and those who observe Advent preach the second coming of Christ just before Christmas. That's wise. The world doesn't mind a baby in a manger because the baby's not going to judge them. The world doesn't mind the first coming of the Lord because that was for forgiveness and mercy and salvation. The world loves the first coming of Jesus and hates the second coming. And therefore the world will celebrate his first coming till the last Christmas, but they will not celebrate his second coming because he isn't coming again to save the world. From thence he shall come again to judge the quick and the dead. And it's not very nice to be told you're going to be judged for what you haven't done. And the world will never celebrate that. But it is as true as his first coming. In fact, it struck me last week that you don't need so much faith to believe he's coming the second time. When he's been once, it's much easier to believe he'll come again, isn't it? The world doesn't. Now look at the punishment that was meted out to those who were not ready. Cut to pieces, weeping and gnashing of teeth, shut outside, in the outer darkness, weeping and gnashing of teeth again, cursed, eternal fire, eternal punishment. And you know, I cannot get round those words of Jesus. I'm amazed that the only person in the whole Bible that God could trust with the truth about hell was Jesus. He couldn't trust any apostle with the truth, couldn't trust any prophet with the truth. All my teaching on hell comes from Jesus. As if the one person who could warn people about it would be the one who would give his own blood to save people from it. And here we have the profound truth said, and we've got to grapple with it in the last few minutes, that disciples who are not ready go to hell. And we must grapple now with this very serious truth which Jesus is giving us. It is disciples he is talking to, and disciples who are not ready go to hell. There's no trace here of purgatory. There's no trace here of being handicapped in the future life. There's no trace here of forfeiting something. There is only the language which Jesus reserved for hell, which is a place of most appalling suffering. Weeping and gnashing of teeth. I used to think that would be remorse. I now realize it is rage. And that hell will be full of raving people who are shaking their fist at God for sending them there. And I wouldn't like to be surrounded by a lot of raging people who are angry with God for sending them there. Weeping, gnashing of teeth, outer darkness. It's terrible. I don't think people realize. People outside the church don't realize, but people inside the church don't always realize who Jesus is talking to or what he's saying. So we must finally face very honestly the truth of what Jesus is saying. These are not rank unbelievers. These are not pagan, heathen people on some distant South Sea island. These are 12 men who for 3 years have shared his ministry. These are 12 men who've taught and preached and healed in the name of Jesus. And in each of the stories, the people who are finally rejected are those who have had a connection with the central figure in the story. In the first story, it's a servant of the householder who is sent to hell. In the second story, it is 5 of the virgins, the bridesmaids, waiting for the wedding, looking for the bridegroom coming. In the third story, it was a man who had been given a talent by the businessman before he went on the journey. And in the fourth story, the goats have been in the flock of the one shepherd. This is the challenge of these four stories. You can be as near as that to Jesus and still not be ready.